All right, I think we're live. Push 1 in the chat if you can hear me. All right, got a confirmation. Thank you for the confirmation. Welcome back to the Black Brain Trust. This is episode 779, Space and Technology. Please hit the like button as you come in, share the video if possible, and hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust. There's a document in the description beneath the video for you to follow along with and the reference. If you want to engage in discussion, to say something in chat, we'll drop the link for you so we can engage. If you don't want to engage, then we'll just roll out of here. All right. Let me bring up the first item on the docket. All right, just push 1 in the chat if you can see my screen. All right, got a confirmation. Thank you for that confirmation. Let's get started. This is from Singularity Hub. Autonomous trucks will be cruising down highways next year, startup says. We'll see about this. Self-driving cars get all the hype, or they did before people realized they weren't going to be ready by 2020 or 2022 or this year. But self-driving trucks are likely to hit the road first. Not only is the bulk of their driving done on highways, which is far simpler than navigating urban roads with all their obstacles, there's been a shortage of truck drivers for years, and it doesn't seem to be getting better. So there's a market need for trucks that can drive themselves. If one company's plan plays out, trucks without drivers will be cruising down highways by next year. On Monday, driverless hardware and software specialist Aurora Innovation announced that its Aurora Driver, a system of sensors, software, and a computer designed to give any vehicle self-driving capabilities, is feature complete. This means all the product's technical capabilities are in place, and it's entering its final phase for development. The company is planning to launch the driver commercially next year. The current version of the product is Beta 6.0, and it's specifically built for service on Aurora's Dallas to Houston route, which is one of the most highly trafficked shipping corridors in the country. At 240 miles long, the route is mostly a straight shot on Interstate 45 and made up the initial run of autonomous freight pilot Aurora did with FedEx. They subsequently added a 600-mile route between El Paso and Fort Worth. As a company press release explains, the main difference between Beta 6.0 and its predecessor is the system's improved ability to handle uncommon road scenarios that impact safety, like high winds, collisions, or sudden heavy rain, snow, or fog. Beta 6.0 can detect the severity of these conditions and either slow down or look for a safe place to pull over. That's very impressive. If a vehicle does get in an accident, the system is trained to pull over and alert one of the company's command center specialists. In addition, Aurora worked with Waymo to design a flashy beacon that alerts oncoming traffic when one of the trucks is pulled over on the side of the road. Aurora was founded by industry veterans Chris Urmson, who previously led Waymo, Sterling Anderson, who oversaw Tesla's autopilot program, and Drew Bagnell, who worked on Uber's self-driving program. The company's 2019 funding round raised more than $530 million, with Amazon being one of the main investors. The company has partnered with major automakers like Volvo, Volkswagen, Toyota, and Hyundai, among others. In 2020, Aurora acquired Uber's self-driving unit, and in 2021 went public via a $13 billion special purpose acquisition company, SPAC deal with Reinvent Technology Partners. Subsequently, though, its stock fell by more than 85%. Urmson optimism seems unshakable, though. Quote, "We look at trucking and we see a landscape where we feel like we're the only viable player," he recently told Fast Company. "It's an $800 billion business in the US, and we're a company that is well capitalized. That's got incredible talent, amazing partnerships, and awesome technology. We're like, let's just go execute." Now that Aurora Driver's architecture is complete, the company will shift its focus to closing its driver safety case, outlining its approach to safety and demonstrating that vehicles equipped with its self-driving system are safe to be on public roads. The U.S. Department of Transportation requires this documentation before the company can commercially launch its product. If all goes to plan, trucks outfitted with Aurora Driver will be cruising the Houston-Dallas corridor a year from now. Ultimately, the goal is to lighten the burden on truckers and give the freight industry a needed boost, improving efficiency and economic feasibility across the board. I think this is really impressive. I mean, I know that some people in here are truck drivers, and I should turn some volume up here. I know some people in here are truck drivers, and so they have there's skepticism and a little bit of pessimism about autonomous trucks. And I get it, man. If it snows, what is the truck going to do? If the roads aren't plowed in some of these conservative areas, I think that's a valid concern. But I also think that when you start talking about these sort of environmental conditions, I think that's predicated on the state and not so much the vehicle itself. If you test the vehicle in perfect conditions, it's going to, it should operate according to its design spec. Not so much, if the state fails to clean the roads, that's really not the fault of the truck. That's the fault of the state. So that being said, man, I want to bring Complex Design in. What's going on, Complex?
Hey, what's going on, Mike? What's going on, man?
Nothing much, man. What's shaking?
Not much, man. I came in halfway through the article, so I just went ahead and just let you handle that one, man. I'll jump in on the next one.
All right. Yeah. I think that autonomous trucks, make a lot of sense in these straight routes. I
think for certain applications, man, they have a use.
Mm-hmm.
You can always find use case for these types of technologies. I think that the trouble comes in when we're looking at sort of reindustrializing a space using a technology. And maybe I think, is robotics in the title of this live stream?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So maybe we can talk about this when we bring up the robotics conversation. But I was literally just watching a video while I was eating about 30 minutes ago about the onset of the Tesla bot, right? And how some industry experts think that the Tesla bot already has the ability to do all of the manufacturing tasks in a gigafactory to like literally replace human workers, right? So there is that human concern there. However, I think with roadway infrastructure, supply chain infrastructure, and all that, there's this it would take some time to be automating the hell out of everything. Like you don't have that. So like you were saying, for certain routes and stuff like that, I think it's totally feasible.
No, I don't disagree at all. I think that
Yeah.
My concern is that we're still using traditional legacy vehicles for autonomy, right? But we have not designed a vehicle that does not need a driver at all, right? We're still using that traditional method, and I think that that's where there's a lot of feedback coming from you, Complex.
Hold on. But
I think when we talk about this, man, I think the traditional truck to me is the challenge, right? We're taking these legacy vehicles and we're dropping technology on top of it that allows it to be autonomous, but we're not designing the truck from the ground up to be autonomous. There should be no steering wheel in there, for all intents and purposes. It should be drive-by-wire. There should be no driver and passenger seats. That shouldn't even exist. And so when you say autonomous, kind of a misnomer, but I get it. You have to test all this stuff out. I just think that there's enough truck drivers out there that you can partner with to do research and analysis to pull a lot of the trucking logs and driver logs to make this stuff a little bit more feasible, so that you're not actually reinventing the wheel with the same sort of cab-based vehicle. I think that to me, that's the the downfall of all of this. So
I think the fear from like the actual trucker and independent operator side of things, and hell, even maybe like some of like the mid-sized companies, is that let's just say you have a tech firm that comes in with a fleet of trucks, and let's just say those trucks are vetted and tested, right? I mean, they start snagging up contracts, dude, for pennies on the dollar, because the resources utilized to do it is far less, right? They don't have like human resource to have to worry about, right? They're only just insuring the vehicle, right? And they can just send these things out on runs, man, as long as they have the charging infrastructure to support the transportation routes. That's the other important part. Having the ability to support this stuff, right? From a charging infrastructure standpoint, those trucks have huge batteries. So, charging or being able to swap them out is what would be key.
Well, these trucks in particular are not electrified. They're still diesel based.
So they're still okay. So they're putting the whatchamacallit, the self-driving units on the diesel vehicles.
Yeah, the same traditional vehicles. That's what I was saying. That it's going to be difficult to make. It seems like a waste of money and investment to drop new technology on legacy vehicles to perform actions that still require a driver. I just don't think that's the most optimal thing. But according to them, they think that Aurora think that it's a great idea. I would beg to differ. I think that you can collect data better that way if all you're going to do is there's a lot of feedback coming from you, Complex. If all you're going to do is pull this data that's collected, but in order to build a self-driving truck, that's what I'm saying. Like the idea of like what we're seeing on screen, this truck right here, what's the point? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But that's just me, because it still requires human interaction to buckle, or to hitch the trailer to the, to the rig itself. I don't know, man. I look at things differently. I think if you're going to have an autonomous vehicle, it should be built from the ground up to be autonomous and not,
not retrofitted.
Yeah, not retrofitted. You don't put Jordans on anybody and think they're going to, turn up on the court. That just doesn't work that way. And so you're going to have some issues. All right, man, let me get to the meat and potatoes of tonight. This is from the Brookings Institute. Centering racial equity and inclusion in Pittsburgh's innovation economy. We covered Pittsburgh some weeks ago. And so I want to make sure that put some context behind this, but let's dig into this. In recent years, there's been no shortage of headlines positioning Pittsburgh as the next Silicon Valley. These aspirational narratives are built on the success of the region's advanced manufacturing, life sciences, and autonomous system clusters, which rose out of a close collaboration and strategic investment from public, private, nonprofit, and academic sectors dedicated to Pittsburgh's turnaround. Such innovation comes with many benefits and competitive advantages for a local economy. But in the case of Pittsburgh, it's worth asking, from whom is this turnaround intended? And given Silicon Valley's reputation for maintaining white majority and exclusionary workspaces, vast wealth inequities, and a housing crisis, should Pittsburgh really follow its example? Squeeze this up. To ensure Pittsburgh does not fall into the same trap, inclusion cannot be an afterthought, and racial equity concerns need to be viewed front and center. Our colleagues previously looked at the opportunities and shortcomings of Pennsylvania's innovation economy, including imbalances across race and geography. Building on that work, we focus on efforts on the Pittsburgh region, which has received federal support through the Build Back Better Regional Challenge as one of the state's key technology hubs. Fortunately, several things are working in Pittsburgh's favor to ensure its leaders do not make the same mistakes as other tech hubs. In addition to the city's roadmap for inclusive innovation, the region also hosts several convening bodies, conferences, apprenticeship programs, and other initiatives devoted to strengthening diversity in STEM education and workforce pipelines. There are also incubators, accelerators, and hubs that help diverse entrepreneurs start and build their companies through education, mentorship, and co-working communities. But even with these initiatives in place, an inclusive innovation economy in Pittsburgh is not inevitable. A concerted effort is necessary to move beyond data planning and one-time or siloed initiatives and toward a city and regional commitment to racial equity and inclusion. Moreover, given the region's history of racial equities, deconstructing structural racism should be a central goal and mission for all Pittsburgh's leaders, regardless of sector or industry. Many of the organizations in the region's decision-making apparatus hold significant power, so much so that they spurred economic growth via sizable investments to specific industries and communities. Yet, many of these organizations may be majority white-led and insensitive to issues of diversity while perpetuating inequities, necessitating examination of how existing power dynamics can be altered. This is true throughout every tech industry, whether it's information technology, robotics, you name it. This is pretty much the lens that we're dealing with here. And so I'm glad they're highlighting this. This report describes how local leaders can ensure Pittsburgh develops as an inclusive tech hub and avoids the inequities of other hubs, from creating a shared vision dedicated to inclusion to investing in Black tech entrepreneurs, to addressing bias and discrimination head on. The ideas presented here should serve as a conversation starter for local leaders. Moving toward a shared vision centered on racial equity and inclusion. Pittsburgh has been the subject of many reports highlighting both disparities and upward trends. Plans have been made, meetings have been held, and initiatives have been launched to address inequities in the region's tech industry and wider economy, yet inequities persist. According to Brookings Metro analysis of the Census Bureau's annual business survey and American Community Survey, of the Pittsburgh metro area, 42,396 employer businesses, only 6.96% have non-white owners, with 1.03% being Black owned and 0.61% being Latino or Hispanic owned. And despite a 1.21 percentage point growth in the number of minority-owned businesses since 2017, that rate is less than half of the percentage of the total minority residents. The case is worse for Black-owned businesses, which have declined steadily since 2017 and now equate to roughly 1/8 the rate of Black residents representation within within the metro area population. Ownership rates among people of color within professional, scientific, and technical services are not publishable due to, quote, high sampling variability, poor response quality, or other concerns about the estimate quality. To move from data and research to action, local leaders should ask the following questions. Where is power concentrated within organizations, convening bodies, and decision-making tables in the Pittsburgh region? Where are resources, investments, and capital flowing to and not flowing to? What can be done to refrain from our understanding of who is part of Pittsburgh's innovation economy and its economy as a whole, so that it centers Black and Brown communities? These are excellent, excellent questions. To address these questions, stakeholders across the board, across sectors, should come together with the goal of not only answering them and others, but also creating a shared vision for Pittsburgh centered on racial equity and inclusion. These stakeholders should then develop an action plan with measurable public goals and other accountability mechanisms. Though this may seem daunting, Pittsburgh's leaders have collaborated on projects of this magnitude before when they transformed the region's economic landscape from a Rust Belt relic to an emerging tech hub. Through their concerted efforts, they generated higher paid jobs and induced capital inflows from different parts of the country. Over the last 10 years, more than $10.5 billion have been invested in Pittsburgh tech companies. Additionally, the federal and state government played a critical role in providing grants to research universities and seeding funding to entrepreneurs in the technology fields. How many times have I said this over the last few years, that government plays a significant role as a catalyst to drive these sort of industries in regards to tech? If you're not working with the government, you're not talking business. Okay, you're not talking about creating an ecosystem. Get rid of this. Unfortunately, many Black Pittsburghers, no, I didn't know that's what they referred to them as. Unfortunately, many Black Pittsburghers were not included in these gains. If Pittsburgh's leaders can collaborate to build an inclusive tech ecosystem with the same intensity as it did in transforming the region's industry base, more people can reap its benefits. Considering, for example, what the Pittsburgh region's Black majority communities would look like 10 or 20 years from now if multiple stakeholders join forces to make transformative investments in underinvested communities with the same concerted effort. How many times have we talked about that on here? Given this context, leaders should carefully consider who is participating in these conversations and what goals should be pursued to ensure the success of a project of this magnitude. Because the region already has networks and convening bodies, it would be easy to continue convening the same parties and stakeholders. Yet inviting the people who are not typically included in these bodies is crucial, as is ensuring that enough participants have deep ties to Black and other underrepresented communities and businesses. Philanthropy can play an important role in providing the resources and incentives for diverse stakeholders and those who have historically been excluded from decision-making spaces to participate. That's what I was talking about with Perfect Blackness the other day about Chicago and its innovation hub. The group may focus on tackling wealth concentration and prioritizing funds for underinvested entrepreneurs, workers, and communities. Other objectives could be close to close communication gaps within the tech ecosystem and build trust between communities or sectors. Shared objectives may also include issues not necessarily associated with innovation economies, but related to them, such as improving quality of life, lowering barriers to financial inclusion, and increasing housing affordability. For example, stakeholders could consider many of the recommendations highlighted by 17 Asset Management and the Riverside Center for Innovation, which detail the ways strategic capital can address the issues around BIPOC entrepreneurship, tech-adjacent supply chains, and economic development more broadly. Without inclusivity in Pittsburgh's innovation economy, whole sections of the region's population are barred from opportunities for upward mobility, wealth building, and influence. Meanwhile, the region is limited in its access to diverse talent and is not able to maximize its economic growth. Brookings Metro researchers have noted that enhancing inclusion in innovation economies requires growing a more inclusive entrepreneurial ecosystem. How many times have we discussed that on here? Developing that ecosystem. If you don't have that ecosystem, you're not talking about anything progressive at all. Among their recommendations was the provision of additional state funding for the Diverse Leaders Venture Program of the State Small Business Credit Initiative, SSBCI, which would provide loans to venture capital firms with diverse owners investing in businesses owned and controlled by diverse populations. The program is relatively small. The estimated total state funding, $17 million, is about as much as one large VC deal. Additional state funding would allow a larger number of diverse VC organizations to participate and increase the resources they deploy to diverse entrepreneurs and startups. Part of the state level work should also include moving beyond loans and providing investment capital to diverse-led venture funds and firms when traditional VC firms do not. Local firms such as Black Tech Nation Ventures, which funds and supports emerging Black tech talent, and the firms they serve would be example beneficiaries. Like I said before, you have to be organized in order to make these type of things work. And I think that is an example of it. Initiatives like these are an important component for ensuring Black entrepreneurs receive the capital they need to launch and grow their businesses. A National Bureau of Economic Research working paper found that Black-owned startups are more likely to receive venture funding from Black partners at VC firms who are, quote, leveraging their expertise, credibility, and networks to select high-quality, underrepresented entrepreneurs. This paper shows that the biases of venture capitalists, the majority of whom are white, may drive part of the Black funding gap, which has been reflected in anecdotal accounts from Black founders and CEOs across the country. The VC industry is largely concentrated in three areas: San Francisco, San Jose, New York, and Boston. And more broadly, VC diversity is absurdly low. This lack of diversity directly impacts the amount of dollars invested in women and underrepresented founders. And white majority-led VCs bear responsibility for withholding capital from minority and women-led firms. With that in mind, Pittsburgh's local white majority-led VCs and other private sector partners play an important part in ensuring venture funds reach diverse entrepreneurs. They should examine their practices to see where they can differentiate themselves, lest they miss out on innovation from diverse founders. There are countless measures of the investments reaching Pittsburgh's tech sector, starting to include the dollar amounts flowing to Black-led and other diverse-led startups will be crucial for assessing progress. Meanwhile, supporting underrepresented entrepreneurs will also include investing in the ecosystem, the intermediaries within them that enable them to grow and thrive, such as incubators and accelerators, where the private sector does not support the ecosystems of diverse entrepreneurs. All levels of local government can further support nonprofit accelerators and incubators such as Ascender, which help address the networking, education, and capital challenges these entrepreneurs face by offering capacity building and business development support. How many times have I talked about this ecosystem that is necessary to make this work? Lastly, at the city level, goals can be set or expanded for contracting with minority and women-owned businesses based on the local disparity study findings. City departments engaging in procurement can also be required to set and track goals and submit written reports summarizing their procurement activities. Meanwhile, at all levels of government, procurement systems can be improved or streamlined with clearer processes and guidance, and requests for proposals can be designed with equity. and the specific pain points of minority-led firms in mind. Local governments can also strengthen their procurement outreach teams and assist prime contractors in bringing on subcontractors led by underrepresented groups. Brookings resident fellow Victor Ray has noted that organizations are not race neutral and race is historically and structurally built into the workplace. Quote, rather than asking how to bring diversity into the workplace, a better question is why so much power and organizational authority remain in white hands, he wrote. Considering Ray's framework, below are some questions for local leaders in Pittsburgh and other places to consider. Are decisions about location, hiring, and other choices exacerbating inequalities? Are organizations using seemingly race-neutral selection criteria or abstract notions of fit, which can exclude certain types of candidates from being considered, hired, or promoted? Are material resources within and outside the organizations flowing equitably? Creating an innovation economy that is welcoming to workers and entrepreneurs for underrepresented groups requires improving organizational culture, including eliminating biases against underrepresented groups, eliminating diversity disparities across organizations, and more critically, addressing discrimination head on. A growing body of research indicates discrimination, in particular racism and sexism, hinders innovation at every stage during education and training, in the practice of invention, and in the commercialization of those inventions. This discrimination not only detrimentally impacts the people targeted, but also the economy by limiting the country's productive capacity. Capital is often required to commercialize inventions and introduce them to the economy. When it comes to non-debt funding sources for startups, such as accelerators, equity crowdfunding, and grant programs like the Small Business Innovation Research and Small Business Technology Transfer Programs, research indicates that the gap in capital received by Black startups versus white-led ones exists entirely within the VC space. According to Crunchbase data, Black startups raised 1% of all VC funds in 2022 nationally. Additionally, other studies find large disparities between Black and white-owned startups in access to capital, such as bank financing, both in the initial year of founding and in subsequent years. Much of the literature on minority entrepreneurship focuses on education, skills, and training deficits for workers of color, or their industry-specific knowledge gaps. However, according to findings from researchers Rachel M.B. Atkins and April Barrage, racial and ethnic disparities in tech entrepreneurship persist even when accounting for racial differences in educational attainment, possession of a STEM field bachelor's degree, and the rate at which workers select into the tech industry employment. In other words, inequality in tech entrepreneurship persists even among a segment of the workforce with greater educational attainment, skills, and training. As a result, policies aimed at solely addressing supposed skills or knowledge deficits will not completely address these disparities. Discrimination is critical to confront, and the onus is on institutions, organizations, and managers to adapt. Two places to start and are changing workplace policies and crafting better public policies. For the former, a recent report from RAND noted that an organization culture affects employee recruitment, success, and retention. It recommended implicit bias training for staff and management, as well as skills-based hiring new employees based on the skills rather than specific degrees or educational backgrounds. Employers in the Pittsburgh region can tap into such methods through economic development nonprofits like Vibrant Pittsburgh, which provides diversity, equity, and inclusion resources to local businesses and organizations that want to attract and retain a diverse workforce. Beyond these recommendations, something Pittsburgh leaders can begin doing today across sectors and industries, as well as in companies, philanthropy, economic development councils, and tech councils, is to evaluate the diversity makeup of their management and boards. If their organization is not reflective of the wider demographics of the region, they should evaluate why. Companies and organizations should voluntarily report public goals and track improvements over time, including the racial and gender makeup of their workforce, especially of their boards and leadership. Foundations should track where their funds and investments are going, to what individuals and organizations and communities, and prior to granting funds, require grantees to track and report diversity metrics. To encourage accountability as well as progress, public policy solutions should be used where voluntary action by firms is not sufficient. State and local policies can be crafted to increase diverse representation on tech company boards and workforces. They can also require local companies report the racial and gender makeup of their company's leadership boards and workforces, as well as the pay and promotion data by race and gender. Finally, policies at the federal level can be designed to compel private sector and academic actions by offering carrots and sticks. For example, policies could be expanded to include equity components where universities or other companies seeking federal funding would first need to meet DEI requirements or write up clear diversity action plans in their grant applications. Federal lawmakers should also allocate more funding and resources for the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, EEOC, to increase compliance with anti-discrimination laws and regulations. This report is intended to spark conversation among leaders and residents in the Pittsburgh region and beyond, as plenty of local officials across the country grapple with ways to improve inclusivity in their innovation economies. The ideas presented here are not exhaustive, and many can be built upon. Pittsburgh's leaders have always possessed imagination, vision, and mission, and they've done the seemingly impossible before. Inclusion, however, was not always a priority. At present is an opportunity to course correct and set the region apart from other innovation hubs by centering and prioritizing racial equity and inclusion. That was a lot to cover. So, Complex, what are you thinking if you're still there? Oh, Complex drop. All right. Here's the deal. What they're saying in this article, we've been saying since the inception of this channel, that the problems here are compound. Let me drop the link, because I know Complex may be trying to get back on. We've been talking about this since the inception of this channel, right? We've been doing this content, and we've been saying for quite some time that this has been the ultimate problem with trying to get more Black people into the tech industry. It's not just an organizational issue, it's an industry issue. And there's been a lot of, not just the glass ceiling, but there's been, barriers put in place to prevent Black faces from being in these sort of dominant spaces. And so when people want to say, we just need to step our game up or pull ourselves up by a bootstrap, this is not a bootstraps argument anymore. We're long past that stage. The problems that existed in other industries have flowed into the innovation economy. I mean, you can go back through American history and see how many Black inventors had their patents stolen and their inventions stolen, their intellectual property stolen by white people so that they can actually capitalize on it. And so this is a systemic issue throughout American history, as well as within the social structures itself, that need to be addressed. And I think the only way you really address this is by having progressive elected officials in place that care about the locals' economies that they're actually representing, because this is not going to happen in Florida. because they've already banned the whole DEI thing, right? They're doing this in Texas too, banning DEI. Well, if you're going to have more inclusivity in these innovation economies, how are you going to do that if people who are elected to represent, your best interests are actually working against your best interests? How does that make any sense? Okay. How does that make any sense? And so this can only happen in places where the political climate is ready for it. If you go below the Mason-Dixon line, you're not really going to see it like that. They're trying to rebuild Black Wall Street right now into an innovation hub, and look how much stonewalling is going on over there. Black people are trying to create their own ecosystem over there, and so you see these sort of efforts to try to stymie the growth and opportunities of to Black people so that they can't be a part of that eco engine, but white people are sucking up all the resources, as the article mentioned, and we've covered this many times before, that Black people make up 1%, of VC funding. I mean, that's insane. You're talking about an industry that has $500 billion in funding. How is it possible that they're only getting 1%? And the 1% that they're getting, they're lucky, to be getting that. 1% is peanuts compared to what these other folks are getting. And so it's not just an issue of, oh man, if we can just, get Chat GPT to, advocate for us, that's not an issue. That's and she's never going to do that, right? This person is never going to do that. The problem here is structural racism has poisoned the innovation sector, the tech sector, the STEM sector. Is just poisoned it, and has made it difficult for a lot of people to do their own thing, so that they don't have to work with these sort of biases in the workplace, where they can start their own thing, but they don't have access to capital. And access to capital is the main challenge here. And not only that, but the inclusive nature of actually being at the table, at the decision-making, areas to influence, progress. They're not actually being, they're not being included there. So how do you make all of this work? And so you're seeing, typically you would have, in the 20th century, you had Jim Crow. And now you have, in the tech sector, you have Jim Code, where discrimination isn't at the face anymore, but it's at the lines of code. So when you try to apply for certain financial vehicles and systems for your startup as a Black person, the code has actually been written in a way that you can't see it, but it's actually working against you. So that's why things like AI and machine learning and these sort of sciences have to have an ethical approach to it too. And I think that you can play a significant role there. I think we can play a significant role there. And I'm thinking this is a conversation that I don't see happening in this space, right? The last 10 days have been, we've been bombarded by, Anglo-Saxon people being propped up as visionaries for advancement in predominantly Black male spaces. I don't even know where to begin with these sort of comments and analysis that people are propping up, that you can actually solve these problems, these structural problems, by propping up millennial women, to be the advocates for change and progress. It's really strange. I don't see these people having this kind of conversation right here, despite all of the PhDs that they have on their channels and all the credentialed people they have on their channels. I don't see them having this conversation at all. Okay. Link is in the chat if you want to join. If not, we'll roll out. But I'm saying, with that being said, let me jump to this next item here. This is from CNBC. Okay. Black Wealth Matters, how an Ivy League grad is helping his community build wealth through education. The racial wealth gap is just one example of many inequalities continuing to burden Black Americans. As of 2022, white households had an average net worth of nearly $1 million, higher than Black households, according to the St. Louis Fed. It's this disparity that inspired Sharif McDonald, better known as Ross Mack, to become a financial educator. Not only has systemic oppression made it harder for Black Americans to build wealth, but there's a huge education gap that prevents many from finding financial success, he said. To bridge that gap, the 33-year-old created the Maconomics digital series, which he combines his Wall Street experience and Chicago street smarts to create informative financial content aimed specifically at the Black community. It started when Mack was an undergraduate at the University of Pennsylvania and realized this Ivy League education was an opportunity that many from his community could never imagine. He refused to take that for granted. Here's how he's using what he learned to empower and uplift those without the same opportunity he had. Mack's wake-up call to start investing came early in his undergraduate career. Quote, I was in Econ 101 class sitting next to a kid who was day trading in the middle of a class. Mack tells CNBC Make It. That was the one thing that opened my eyes and my curiosity and made me say, okay, I want to start investing. From there, Mack opened a brokerage account, which at the same time wasn't as straightforward and low cost as getting started investing is now, he says, but he was determined to get on the same level as his peers. His interest in investing in wealth management eventually led him to a career on Wall Street. Mack spent his summers during college interning at Morgan Stanley and Barclays. After graduation, he worked for Morgan Stanley full-time as a sales analyst. Quote, I truly realize I've been lucky because I was exposed to so many different things, Mack says. Not only did I have a good job, but the type of conversations that I was around, being able to walk down the aisle and see a senior member on my team checking his 401k and seeing $2 or $3 million, it was like, oh, I need to start thinking about retirement now. In 2015, Mack returned to his hometown of Chicago after 3 years on Wall Street, armed with the experience and motivation to bring financial literacy education to his community. For Mack, exposure to the investment big leagues was his biggest teacher. And he recognized that kids and adults from his own community probably wouldn't have the same learning opportunity. While working for Morgan Stanley, he began exploring ways to share what he learned. Making music as the Wall Street rapper, Mack began fusing the worlds he come to know so well, Black and urban hip hop culture with Wall Street financial know-how. He saw a need for someone to speak the language of the Black communities like his in Chicago. Quote, ever since I was a kid, one of the things we always argued about was who's better, Iverson or Kobe, or Michael Jordan or this person, Mack says. What I really wanted to do is just transform inner city kids all around the world to start having a conversation like, what's a better company, Microsoft or Apple? Do you like Netflix or Facebook? Having those type of conversations can help, quote, Mack, make financial literacy more digestible and accessible, he says. Mack thought of the spaces in his community like the barbershop where friends and neighbors debated sports or shared advice on the relationships in a comfortable, welcoming environment. He believed getting people to shift some of those conversations to financial topics could help make investing and money management less intimidating. Mack's music and Macconomics call-in style videos on Instagram and YouTube struck a chord. Viewers poured in and Mack amassed a big enough following to capture brands' attention. Today, his YouTube channel has over 10,000 subscribers. Revolt TV, a media network founded by Sean Diddy Combs, reached out to develop a content partnership. At first, the company just wanted to repost Mack's videos, but it grew into Mack hosting Macconomics show on the network in 2019. Though Mack already recognized the financial education gap between Black and white Americans, the murder of George Floyd and equal rights demonstrations in 2020 made his mission ever more important. Quote, when it comes to the Black Lives Matter movement, it saddens me to think we are having the same fight in protest that our ancestors were having, Mack says. In a capitalist society, those without capital tend not to have power. I want to focus on liberating my community by giving them the knowledge and exposure to gain wealth. Mack adopted the slogan, Black Wealth Matters, to bring attention to the idea that economic empowerment is a major step forward, a major step toward equality for Black Americans. Once we start becoming financially free, we can hopefully become politically free, he says. Mack continues to produce content for Revolt TV as well as The Street and BET. He recently starred in the Netflix documentary Get Smart with Money, alongside with financial pros like Tiffany, the budgetista, Liche. He's also pursuing his passion for music as a creative outlet and income generator through sync and licensing deals. Looking forward to growing his audience, which already includes over 76,000 Instagram followers, Mack wants to expand into content geared toward children to help his followers get started understanding money even younger. He hopes his children will be able to learn how to use money and create even better opportunities for themselves than what he had growing up. Thinking about financial literacy, like in language, Mack believes early exposure can promote long-term fluency. Quote, despite the fact that my children are only 1 and 2 years old, I speak to them about the economy, stocks, and credit scores, Mack says. I want them to become submerged in the life of finance because it will make them more confident in their financial decision as they get older. Interesting story. We know of this guy. He's been around. And so I find this interesting that folks are taking the initiative to get things done, but in this space, you don't really hear that. For whatever reason, Anglo-Saxon women are the focus. We don't necessarily promote Black men like we should in this space, despite the fact it's a predominantly Black male space. So I salute to him, the Wall Street trapper, and hope that everything works out as he plans. But let's get back to this article. And let's talk about next steps. I think that this is not isolated to just Pittsburgh, okay? This is across the country. And Atlanta may be an exception because I think Atlanta does have a strong tech sector down there amongst Black people, but I don't think that that's replicated everywhere else. And so Atlanta would be, you could put an asterisk next to Atlanta, but I think that the overall issue here is systemic across the country in a lot of areas. I've heard Mayor Tashara Jones talk about these sort of issues in St. Louis, okay? We know Mayor Chokwe Lumumba in Jackson is trying to address this issue as well. That's one of the the biggest Black populations in the country at 86% in the city, larger than most cities from a demographic perspective. And so they're having the same issues. We're having access to capital and infrastructure and ecosystems being built. These things matter when it comes to developing these sort of industries. And so we've been saying this for quite some time, that this is the biggest challenge right now to fourth industrialization. We talk about fourth industrialization a lot on here because, it's the center around everything going forward. Fifth industrialization, sixth industrialization coming forward in the next 10 years. I think what's happening in these predominantly Black male spaces, folks are just they're not up to speed on this. They're out to lunch. A lot of them are focused on, who slept with who, and, some of these, not, low-level talking, these low-level conversations that don't really lead to anything, who's a goddess, and, Marie this and Chat GPT that don't really amount to anything. At the end of the day, you can't really pull anything from these conversations at all. I see a lot of guys pouring a lot of hours of time into content creation around gossip, male gossip, about Anglo-Saxon women who largely don't feature you on their panels. It's really strange. Meanwhile, things like this that, where you're missing billions of dollars, man. We're not talking about, a couple of super chats and cash apps. We're talking billions and billions of dollars on the table that are missing, and you just don't have access to because muckety mucks are actually blocking you from having access to it. Okay. Guys atting people and atting women and hoping to get their attention and trying to, stir up conversation around, the matriarchy, the gynocracy, the Bilderberg, and all these other things that don't make any sense at the end of the day. It's not leading you to anything, because that's not the issue at the end of the day. What the issue is these muckety mucks, these Anglo-Saxon muckety mucks who keep jamming up the process for progress in a lot of these areas, especially areas that tend to have vast underrepresentation of Black folk at the table in the industry. You're talking about places that are, 25, 30, 35% Black, but only have 1%, 2%, 3% Black representation in the industry. That's a problem. Okay, that's a big problem. So when folks want to have these sort of economic streams, we talk about economics, you're not talking about this. I can tell you that right now, you're not talking about this. You're not having that conversation. This is the conversation that we have here. Okay. We're not talking about super stickers. We're talking about billions of dollars that lead to trillions of dollars in wealth generation. Okay. Links in the chat if anyone wants to join. If no one wants to join, then that's fine, and we can just peel up out of here, man. I know Complex was here earlier, but he had to take off. But this is important. This is very important discussion. So that's why I wanted to put this on the docket. Last week we covered Black Boys Joy and Black Boys Code. We've been covering the advancements of nonprofit organizations that have been trying to close the gender gap in terms of Black boys, in terms of Black men. We've been covering that for the last few years, but we're continuing that coverage. Now in 2023, I have yet to see anybody in the space actually cover it either, despite the fact that they promote their channels as, being Black male first and second and third. I don't see anybody covering this sort of content. They get triggered by certain keywords like diversity and people of color, but they don't actually understand that, Black people don't live in a vacuum. Okay. We don't live in a vacuum. You can't say we live in a melting pot and then complain about being included with other people who are one shade lighter than you. That doesn't make any sense. Okay. Live streams going for 4, 6, 8, 9, 10, 12 hours talking about an Anglo-Saxon woman, but no real talk about how you're going to get to the bag. Where's the bag at? Instead of wearing a man purse, at these manosphere conferences, man, show me the real bag where we're talking about 7 and 8 figures. Where's that at? I like to see that. I like to see those discussions happen more often in this space. Okay. We talked about autonomous trucking. We know that there's a lot of Black men who are truck drivers in here. What does that mean to them? How is it going to impact them? In what way can they benefit from it? How do they get involved in it? Where's the inclusion aspect? Where's the access to the opportunities? These are the things that we discuss here, and these are the sort of questions that need answers. I don't see anybody else in the space really having it. That being said, I'm going to take off. Thank you all for joining. Please hit the like button, share this video if possible, and hit that notification bell so you go to the updates from the Black Brain Trust.